Hi, folks. Larry Rolla here. We're going to change a couple of things around because I really like doing the lives better. Um, I tried going back uh, in all the podcasts to see what I left out, what I didn't say, what I did say. I got past the third podcast and I says, I'm not going to do this no more. I like it better and I feel more comfortable just answering questions. So from now on, every Tuesday, at 2 o'clock, we're going to do a live, and every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, we're going to do a live. So we're going to do two lives on Tuesday, one at 2 o'clock and one at 7 o'clock. And I may even do a few in between. I don't know, but I'll let you know. I'm learning how to do this, so I'll be able to do it by myself wherever I may be. So tonight, what we're going to talk about, so I don't have to say the same thing twice, is the state of racing today. What happened since I've been around in the late 50s and early 60s, from that point up to this point, and it's really sad. It's sad for just about everybody involved. So as you can see, I don't have my dark glasses on, and my eyes are, I'm going to be squinting, but I have my reading glasses on because I'm going to read a lot. And I'm going to call this two sides to every story, because in reality, there's always two sides to every story. So here we go. Every year, close to 1,000 horses die at racetracks nationwide from either from leg injuries or heart attacks. That's a lot of horses. And the reason this happens is because of, I believe, a small part of it is lack of conditioning. A big part of it is the drugs and the racetrack. They tried synthetic tracks. They break down more horses than anything else. But I think the main reason is the drugs. Everybody is looking for an edge, and it started when I first got in the game in the early '60s. They started with the steroids, then injecting joints and 2-year-olds, and then it just got that start running rampant. And then when the Meadowlands opened, I think it was in '76, right up to the '80s, they started using Epigen and clenbuterol, and then I think it was in '88, they had the ELISA test, and that then milkshakes became popular because they could detect just about every drug that was approved by the Food and Drug Administration. So that's when all of these trainers that had connections, or wealthy owners that have connections, started getting drugs that did basically the same thing, and sometimes even better, that weren't approved. Therefore, they had no test for them in this country, so they were getting them from all around the world, and they did it, to create an edge, and then everybody started to follow, because you have to create some kind of level playing field, and it turned out that the ones that could afford these drugs, and these veterinarians that would administer them, they rose to the top, and the smaller guys at smaller tracks, they were stuck. They couldn't afford the drugs like Epigen, and they couldn't afford the veterinarians every week to come around and check the blood, and they were completely abusing clenbuterol, And you got to remember that every every drug that you give a horse has a side effect, just like us. You could take an aspirin and you can get a side effect from an aspirin, but some of these horses are getting some of these powerful drugs, and you have no idea. The horse can't talk to you. They may act up, they may colic, they may go off their feed, they may just feel shitty. Uh, and that's one of the sad parts about racing horses, because if they're athletes, and human athletes, they can tell you, I don't feel good today, or that they could protect themselves. And these horses, they have no protection, and all the trainers, and in many cases the owners too. You always find that the owners, they make believe they don't know nothing. They make believe they don't know what's going on, and they just gravitate to the guy who's winning all the races. And sometimes, and many times through the years, I've seen guys you never even heard of all of a sudden become leading trainers. It's just unbelievable. And then maybe a year or two later, when they found a test for the drug, they get caught and they get suspended. But in the recent years, they're really getting out of control, and it's gotten to the point now where it's not only criminal, it's very criminal. Yeah, I'm going to give you a couple examples, and then I'm going to give you the other side of the story. When I first started paying attention to this in the '60s, I paid attention to naturally everybody was back then, as far as the thoroughbreds go. Kelso was, I think Kelso was 5-time horse of the year. He won 5 horse of the year titles, and he was a great horse. And then there was Secretariat, that everybody thought he was a super horse. I was probably the only one that kind of questioned that, because there were some races he got beat by ordinary horses, and then some races he pulled miracle feats. And I soon found out that his veterinarian was Mark Gerard, and he was the guy that he wound up going to jail because he wound up switching horses, bought some horses from Uruguay or someplace, and it was in all the newspapers. He had F. Lee Bailey defend him for that case, and I think he lost, and he wound up going to jail. But he was way ahead of his time, and in my opinion, the horses that he was treating, because he was the veterinarian for all the top trainers around at the time, and treating all of these world champions like Secretariat and Kelso. And it's hard for me to believe that these horses were racing on hay and oats even back then. So I believe that Dr. Gerard was way ahead of his time, and I could be wrong because I don't have any proof. But what I do have proof of, and the whole world knows, is Georgia Navarro. Now, let me tell you a little bit about old Georgie. He won 7 straight training titles at Monmouth Park through 2019. He was sentenced by a federal judge to 5 years in prison for his role in performance-enhancing the drug scandal that rocked the horse industry. He was ordered to pay $25.8 million in restitution. And that's what happened. That he was one of the ones that really took advantage of everything. He had some major connections, and you almost can't blame the veterinarians, even though that most of the time they were the ones that are administrating the drugs, especially in the in the 80s, when Epigem was kind of popular, and the vet was, all the big stables had the vets given the Epigen, and you can't really blame the veterinarians, even when it was against the rules, and they start putting traces in Epigen, and they just found ways around it. They found synthetic stuff that worked the same way. And you can't blame a vet when a trainer says, if a trainer has, let's say a trainer has 30 horses. We're talking about maybe there's probably the leading trainers. Some of them have 300 horses. Some have 150. Some have 100. But let's just average it out to say 30 horses. And the vet bills, the average vet bills, I know, and I've been out of the game a long time. There's vet bills that run up to $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. But let's say the average vet bill is $2,000. So, and let's say the average number of horses a trainer trains is 30. And the vet bill is $2,000. You're talking about $60,000 a month vet bill. That's $700,000-800,000 a year, and probably $500,000 in that is profit for the veterinarian. And if he has two big stables, like most of them do, you're talking about $1 million business. And if the vet refuses to give and he plays the holy roller stuff and says, I know because I traveled with veterinarians, and it puts them in a bad spot. They don't want to do it, but if they don't do it, they're going to lose the client and $1 million a year in business, and maybe more. So everybody winds up doing it. Okay. Then it starts getting out of hand, because the edge becomes, now you're chasing the guy who has better drugs than you, and it just multiplies and multiplies and multiplies. And many of these drugs, and this is what I believe, are responsible for bones breaking and bone snapping. They just weaken the bones. They just destroy horses. A lot of these drugs. I can't name them all because we'll be here for hours. Because I think right now, this new organization that came about, they barred thousands of drugs. But we're going to get into that. Okay, so that we talk about old Georgie here, and next we'll talk about Scott Robinson, another veterinarian. He had a good run for a lot of years, and he was dealing with a lot of guys in the standardbred business too. And they raided his home one day, and because of that, they unsealed indictments against 29 trainers and veterinarians. I mean, it's rampant. All of this stuff is rampant, and they just trying to get a drug that could do more and better than the other drug. In the meantime, the horses are being destroyed, and the winners are the guys that are using the drugs. That they all become Hall of Famers. They all win a lot of races. And everyone from Lucas all the way down. I believe somebody told me, I don't know if it's true, but somebody told me that Wayne Lucas once bought a laboratory or part of the lab that was testing the blood. Now, I don't know if that's true, but what I do know is true is that some of these big trainers with wealthy owners and owners that have major connections, they built their own black box. so they knew what drugs would pass, what drugs wouldn't pass, and the smaller guys just keep getting left out. And when they try to compete, they can't compete. Now, before I get to the other side of the story, let me tell you. Let's see. We'll talk about the guy who I knew well. I knew his whole family. Grasso, Lou Grasso, him and Alad and Richie Banker. Same thing. Drugs. Grasso got 50 months in jail. Alad 27 months and had to pay back over $600,000. And Banker got 30 months. Veterinarian Seth Fishman, same thing, sentenced to 11 years in jail and has to pay forfeit, I think it was $13.5 million. Now, so you get the picture. You get the picture about the drugs and how it's abused and how they're killing horses. And it's no mystery to me why all these horses are breaking bones and everything else, because I don't care what anybody says. There's certain drugs, and I know 3 or 4 that it just disintegrates the bone. It weakens the bones, and that's why these legs are snapping and everything else. And I can't get into all of that. I can't use the big words. I don't understand the big words, but that's what's happening. It's crazy. So now what happens is you get to the smaller guys that can't afford clenbuterol, that can't afford Epigen, that can't afford the veterinarians that could, and they're not big enough for the veterinarian to take a shot, because these veterinarians are protecting the big stables. So the small guy has no shot. The small guy is not going to get the same service as the big guy, as the big trainer. So the veterinarian is going to protect them. So what do? They have no choice. They're all starving to death. You go to the smaller tracks, they're living in tack rooms. It's terrible. So what happens? I'm going to tell you. I know what happens. There's a lot of stories I can tell you about what happens, but I'm just going to tell you what the small guy does when he can't compete with the big guys. When he gets into a race and every week he has no chance, finishes 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th every week, because the leading guys are winning all the races. And the leading guys get the leading jockeys, the leading trainer, and one by one, all the owners from the small guys go to the big guys, because the owners in reality know what's happening. So what do the small guys do? I'm going to give you one example, and it's really terrible and disgusting, but I lived through all of this stuff. It was right under my nose many, many times at many, many racetracks. Here's what the small guys do to keep up. They get a hold of a veterinarian like Chris Ellsworth. He's a veterinarian. He was up in Monticello, and I know all of this personally. I have it here. So let me read it, because it's really disgusting. A former veterinarian at Monticello and Yonkers Raceways was sentenced Tuesday to 60 days in jail for falsely certifying that 11 harness horses who were killed had died of natural causes. Dr. Chris Ellsworth, 38 years old, of upstate White Lake, pleaded guilty last month to involvement in a plot in which his death certificates permitted the owner and trainers of horses to collect more than $500,000 worth of insurance. So the small guys, because they can't compete and they're going broke, they buy these horses for $5,000, $6,000, $8,000. Ellsworth helps them get insurance, because he whatever he does, and they insure the horses for 2-3 times more than what they pay for them, and then they kill them. And Ellsworth gives them a certificate that they died of natural causes. That's the shit that goes on. And all these guys, they all admitted to doing it. All these trainers, they admitted to doing it, and they all went to jail for 60 days. Some of them were fined 2, 3, 4, up to $70,000, and elsewhere went to jail too. So that's a series of events that happens. These are the things that happen, and you go to the top, it's disgusting. They're killing horses left and right. You go to the bottom, them horses are not dying of racing incident. They're dying because they're not getting the drugs that are breaking these bones. They're dying because they want to collect the insurance money. It's disgusting, and they're starting to become aware of it now. And just like I said a million times, the Racing Commission is full of total incompetent people. It's really a fucking joke. It really is. I'm trying not to get excited. I'm trying to get through this little podcast here. So now what do? They when they realize that harness racing is just about done, and thoroughbred racing is it's going to survive, but it's not what it was. They realize that the drug that they know that the drugs are what's killing these horses in more ways than one. So what do? They hire they create Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority, HISA. Now, that's another joke, and I'll tell you why it's a joke. First, they want to unionize all the stable help. They're going to try. They're going to try. I remember 50 years ago, there was a guy, Mike Agliotti's owner. He tried to do the same thing. They almost killed him. But anyway, they want to unionize all the stable help and everything so they can get benefits and health and all of this and everything else. That will make the daily rate for thoroughbreds. Let's just talk about thoroughbreds now. That will make the daily rate go from maybe 130, 150 a day, what they're getting now, the top guys, to over 200 a day just to keep up with this. Then what they do, they probably banned well over 1,000 drugs that you just cannot use anymore, with absolutely no consideration for the horse. Now, by that I mean, in my opinion, every horse that races the next morning should get a shot of steroids, and right after the race, or maybe the next morning, a shot of butazolidine, and just completely rehydrate them. And they're stopping all of that. They don't want to give them nothing. They expect these horses to run every 2 weeks, all out, train in between and everything, with absolutely no help at all. No massages, no electrolytes, no enjointing a joint if it needs it, no steroids, no nothing. No help, even if they don't even want a horse to have help just to recover. So instead of a thoroughbred who's running full force all the time, instead of him taking 3-4 days to recover, they can make him recover in 1 day, rehydrate him and everything. All of that is out the window now. And then the best thing they're going to do, this is a joke. They're going to spend this outfit, Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority. They're going to spend 2 years and $775,000 to study Lasix and its future. I have the thing here. I'm just going to read one paragraph. The Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority said Wednesday it will pay $773,500 for scientific studies during the next 2 years that could go a long way toward the writing of new rules on the use of Lasix. What a fucking joke. I could do it. I could do it for free. And how long are they going to take? They're going to take 2 years. I could take 2 minutes. And if I really want to get into it, maybe in 2 hours I could explain the whole thing. It's just a joke, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And I don't see how they're gonna fix that. And certainly hiring this group, which they already made a deal with the thoroughbreds. I don't think they're going to make a deal with the standardbreds because they wouldn't be able to. The trainers wouldn't be able to afford uh, everything that they want you to do. Thoroughbreds race every 2, 3 weeks. Standardbred race every 7 days. If you can't help this horse, a thoroughbred, an age thoroughbred probably races 7, 8 times a year, maybe 9 times a year. A standardbred might race 30, 40 times a year. Every 7 days, and trains in between. How do you not help a horse? How do you not help that horse after he races? How do you not give him a shot of Banamine or Bute? How do you not give him a shot of steroids so he could recoup faster? And how could you not give him loads and loads of electrolytes? How could you not inject the joint? How could you not inject a joint with depot cortisone? How could you not help him in that way? Human athletes, they get that done all the time. A lot of them use illegal drugs like Epigen and stuff like that. But I'm talking about just basically, where would Joe Namath be if he couldn't inject his knees? And it goes on and on and on and on. So I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how they're going to do it. All I know is that it's a joke. And I really believe that the people in charge dropped the ball probably starting 40 years ago. And when the Meadowlands opened and the purse money became a lot, and I think in the beginning they had maybe $15 million races at the Meadowlands in the late 70s and early 80s. And then they just thought it was going to go on forever. And before you know it, the lotteries and the gambling and sports betting and casinos, and they just swallowed them up. I think if you go to Meadowlands now, there's more people in the room where you can bet sports than there are people betting horses, and that's sad. And if it wasn't for the supplement money that the casinos were giving these harness tracks, they'd all be out of business. And all because of the neglect of the people. I never forget when I had Larry Kadish as an owner. Larry Kadish bought the largest parcel of land in Old Westbury. And back then it was like $1 million an acre. He bought the largest parcel of land. And he spent millions building a racetrack on it, building barns. He built the house for me. He built the house for himself because he put in a bid, and he was going to bid no matter what it took to buy Roosevelt Raceway, which was right down the street. And he says, okay, get ready. You're going to move to my farm. He got a little mad at me because at the same time I was building a home in Inverary on the golf course in Florida, in Lauderhill. But he wanted me to move in the house that he was building for me on the farm. And he had about 30 or 40 horses, and he was dealing with Madison Square Garden. I think it was Sonny Werbler, and he was willing to spend whatever it took. He didn't get it. It was all politics and all bullshit and all about the money and all about how much is in an envelope going in that direction and how much is going that direction. And he wind up not getting the deal, and he was very, very upset about it. And he was a billionaire. He could have paid cash for it, but they turned it into a shopping center. and it's all about the money. It's all about politics, and that's a sad part. They put people in charge back then that were on 2 or 3 different pensions, that had summer homes and winter homes and this and that, and had no idea what they were doing, and they destroyed the game. Now, the people responsible for all of this, they're already retired with 2 or 3 pensions and everything else. What do they care? And you got these poor guys that it's a labor of love, this racing industry. The smartest guys did what Campbell did, and did what O'Donnell did, and did what a lot of other top drivers did. In the early 80s, they saw this coming, and they said, I'm getting rid of my stable, and I'm just going to become a catch driver. And they got away with it because they were the top guys anyway. But they were training 20, 30, 40 horses, and they couldn't train them. And then they were getting shut out of the drives from the other trainers, that top trainers that wanted them to use them, and they couldn't because they had their own horse in there. So they all did the smart thing. So they probably, them drivers, the top guys that gave up their racing stable, and all they do now is go all around the country and drive and drive and drive. They're the ones that are probably going to make out the best out of this whole mess. But then again, you got to remember that probably 70% of people that were superstars wind up broke. So I hope these kids, like all these young top drivers, if this thing collapses, I asked Billy O'Donnell once, what would you do if you were still training horses and had to compete with the top guys, and you couldn't use drugs or anything, and you just want to race on hay and oats? And he gave me an unbelievable answer. I don't remember what it was, but it was something like I'd be selling pencils on the corner or something. Anyway, that's it. So from now on, these are going to be live. It's going to be live because I just ask me any questions about horse racing, about training, about the mob, about race fixing, about my life, about my book, about anything. But I like that better. I don't like this where I have to read papers and I leave half the stuff out, and so it's going to be live from now on. 2 o'clock every Tuesday and 7 o'clock every Tuesday night. See ya.